Welcome to a realm where innocence meets malevolence, where the ordinary twists into the eerie, and where the unseen shadows hold dark secrets. Today, we delve into 3 chilling tales that will send shivers down your spine and haunt your dreams. From haunted mirrors to possessed playgrounds, these stories explore the depths of horror and the courage it takes to confront the unknown. Join me as we unravel the mysteries and face the terrors lurking in the shadows. Brace yourself for a journey into the heart of darkness.
Emily Parker glanced at the picturesque suburban home as she pulled up the driveway. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the neatly trimmed hedges and flower beds. It was her first time babysitting for the Johnsons, and she was looking forward to an easy night. The children, Lily and Michael, were said to be angelic and well-behaved. Mrs. Johnson greeted her at the door, a harried smile on her face. "Thank you so much for coming on such short notice, Emily. The kids are in the living room. We'll be back by midnight." As the Johnsons left, Emily turned to find Lily and Michael standing in the hallway, staring at her with wide, innocent eyes. Lily, 6 years old with curly blonde hair, clutched a stuffed rabbit, while 8-year-old Michael stood slightly behind her, his expression serious. "Hi, kids," Emily said with a warm smile. "What do you want to do tonight?" Lily's smile was sweet but slightly unsettling. "Can we play hide and seek?" Emily chuckled. "Sure, why not? But first, let's have some dinner." Dinner was a simple affair. Emily made macaroni and cheese, which the children ate quietly, their eyes never leaving her face. She tried to engage them in conversation, but their responses were monosyllabic and distant, as if they were distracted by something only they could see or hear. After dinner, they played a game of hide and seek. Emily found herself growing uneasy as she searched for the children. Their giggles seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When she finally found them, huddled together in the darkened basement, their smiles were unsettlingly serene. As night fell, Emily began to notice odd things. The toys in the living room seemed to move on their own when she wasn't looking. Eerie whispers echoed through the halls, but whenever she turned to listen more closely, they stopped. Shadows darted across the walls, faster than any trick of the light. After tucking the children into bed, Emily settled on the couch with her textbook, trying to focus on her studies. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. She glanced at the baby monitor and froze. The screen showed Lily and Michael's room, but in the corner, there was a dark shadow that seemed to move independently. Her heart pounding, Emily crept upstairs. She paused outside the children's room, listening to the soft sounds of their breathing. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by a nightlight, casting long shadows on the walls. Lily and Michael lay in their beds, apparently asleep. Emily's eyes were drawn to a small, old-fashioned diary lying on the floor near Lily's bed. She picked it up and began to read. The diary detailed a dark ritual performed years ago by the house's previous owners, a couple who had been obsessed with the occult. They had summoned malevolent spirits, hoping to gain power and immortality. Instead, they had unleashed a darkness that now possessed the innocent. As Emily read, the air grew colder. She looked up to see Lily and Michael standing by their beds, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Why are you reading that, Emily?" Lily asked, her voice unnervingly calm. Michael stepped forward, his expression twisted with malevolence. "It's our little secret." Emily backed away, her mind racing. She had to find a way to stop whatever was happening. She had to protect the children and herself from the spirits that possessed them. The night turned into a harrowing game of cat and mouse. Emily's every move was shadowed by the children, who seemed to know her thoughts before she even acted on them. She barricaded herself in the study, frantically searching through the diary for a way to break the ritual. The whispers grew louder, forming coherent sentences that mocked her. "You can't save them, Emily. You can't even save yourself. Desperate, Emily found a passage in the diary describing how to banish the spirits. She needed to perform a counter-ritual that required drawing a protective circle and reciting an incantation. She gathered the necessary items from around the house, her hands shaking as she worked. The moment she began the ritual, the house seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. The lights flickered and the walls shook. The children, or rather the spirits within them, tried to break into the study, their faces twisted into masks of rage. Emily's voice wavered as she recited the incantation, but she forced herself to continue. The protective circle glowed with a faint light, pushing back the darkness inch by inch. With a final desperate shout, she completed the ritual. There was a blinding flash of light, and then silence. Emily collapsed to the floor, exhausted. When she opened her eyes, the children lay unconscious but breathing steadily. The malevolent presence was gone. The Johnsons returned home to find Emily sitting on the couch, the children asleep in their beds. She didn't tell them the full extent of what had happened. How could she? But she left a note, urging them to sell the house and move far away. As Emily drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits weren't truly gone, just waiting for another chance to escape their prison. The whispers still echoed in her mind, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface of the seemingly perfect suburban home. The house stood silent as she drove away, its secrets buried once more, waiting for the next unsuspecting family to uncover its dark history. Emily was haunted by the events of that night for weeks. She couldn't sleep, her dreams filled with the malevolent whispers and the glowing eyes of Lily and Michael. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, as if expecting to see the shadows darting across her own walls. In her small apartment, she tried to forget. She threw herself into her studies, taking on extra shifts at her part-time job, anything to keep her mind occupied. But the darkness followed her, a constant, oppressive presence that she couldn't shake. One night, as she was studying late, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mrs. Johnson. "Emily, can you come over? The kids have been asking for you." Emily's blood ran cold. She hadn't spoken to the Johnsons since that night, and the idea of going back to that house filled her with dread. But she couldn't refuse. She needed to know if the children were all right. When she arrived, the house looked the same as it had before. The Johnsons greeted her warmly, but she could see the worry etched on their faces. "The kids haven't been the same since that night," Mrs. Johnson confessed. "They keep talking about shadows and whispers." Emily's heart sank. She went upstairs to the children's room, steeling herself for what she might find. Lily and Michael were sitting on their beds, their eyes wide and fearful. When they saw Emily, they both ran to her, clutching her legs. "Emily, the shadows are back," Lily whispered. Michael nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "They say they want to take us away." Emily hugged them tightly, trying to keep her own fear at bay. She had to be strong for them. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I won't let anything happen to you." She spent the night with the children, reading them stories and singing lullabies until they finally fell asleep. As she watched them, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility. She had to find a way to protect them from the darkness that lurked in their home. The next morning, she approached Mrs. Johnson with a plan. "I think the house needs a cleansing," she said. "There's something dark here that needs to be banished." Mrs. Johnson looked skeptical but agreed. They brought in a local spiritual healer who performed a cleansing ritual throughout the house. Emily watched as the healer chanted and waved sage, hoping that this would finally bring peace to the family. For a while, it seemed to work. The shadows disappeared, and the whispers stopped. The children started to smile again, and the house felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. But Emily knew that the darkness wasn't truly gone. It was only a matter of time before it returned. And when it did, she would be ready. She would protect Lily and Michael with everything she had, even if it meant facing her own fears. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving the night. It was about confronting the darkness within and finding the strength to fight back. And Emily was determined to do just that, no matter what it took. As she drove home, she couldn't help but feel a sense of resolve. She had faced the darkness once and survived. She could do it again, and she would. For the children, for herself, for the light that still shone within, even in the face of the darkest night. Emily Thompson stood at the foot of the grand staircase, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the mansion's ominous grandeur. Shadows flickered in the dim light, and the air seemed to hum with a life of its own. She clutched her bag tighter, reminding herself that this was just another babysitting job. She could handle this. Mrs. Hawthorne greeted her with a polite but distant smile, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of guarded secrets. "Thank you for coming, Emily. Lily and Michael are upstairs in the playroom. They've been looking forward to meeting you." Emily nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm happy to be here. I'll take good care of them." As she followed Mrs. Hawthorne through the maze of hallways, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in on her. Strange symbols etched into the stone caught her eye, and she felt an inexplicable chill each time she passed one. Lily and Michael were delightful, with their bright eyes and infectious laughter. But as night fell, the atmosphere in the mansion changed. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist in unnatural ways. Emily tucked the children into bed, their sweet faces a stark contrast to the growing sense of dread gnawing at her. She settled into an armchair in the hallway, keeping watch over their room. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. Emily's eyelids grew heavy, and she fought to stay awake. Just as she was about to nod off, a cold breeze brushed against her skin. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. A faint, eerie laughter echoed down the corridor. Emily's heart raced as she stood up, straining to hear. The laughter grew louder, more sinister, and seemed to come from everywhere at once. She hurried to the children's room and found them sound asleep, undisturbed. Confused and frightened, Emily decided to investigate. She followed the sound, which led her to a small, hidden door at the end of the hallway. It creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Her pulse quickened as she descended the steps, the laughter growing louder with each step. At the bottom, she found a dank, candlelit chamber filled with dusty, old books and strange artifacts. The walls were covered in the same symbols she had seen upstairs. In the center of the room stood a large, ancient book. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it, revealing pages filled with incantations and drawings of demonic entities. One passage caught her eye. It detailed a pact made by the Hawthorne family generations ago, a pact with demonic forces that required innocent souls as vessels. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Emily's breath came in short gasps as she felt a cold presence behind her. She turned to find a figure cloaked in shadows, its eyes glowing with malevolent light. "You should not have come here!" the figure hissed. "The pact must be fulfilled!" Emily stumbled back, clutching the book to her chest. She had to protect the children, no matter the cost. She raced back up the stairs, the figure's laughter echoing in her ears. She burst into the children's room, her mind racing. Lily and Michael were awake, their eyes wide with fear. "Emily, the shadows are here," Lily whispered, clutching her teddy bear. Michael nodded, tears streaming down his face. "They want to take us away." Emily hugged them tightly, her resolve strengthening. "I won't let them," she promised. "I'll protect you." She spent the night by their side, reading from the ancient book by the dim light of a flashlight. The book detailed a ritual that could break the pact, but it required immense courage and a pure heart. Emily knew she had to try. As dawn approached, Emily gathered the children and took them to the hidden chamber. The demonic presence was stronger now, its whispers filling the air with dread. She drew a protective circle on the floor and placed the children inside, instructing them to stay put. With trembling hands, she began the ritual, reciting the incantations and invoking the names of ancient protectors. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows around her writhed in agony. The demonic figure appeared again, its eyes burning with rage. "You cannot break the pact!" It roared, lunging at Emily. She stood her ground, her voice steady as she continued the ritual. The protective circle glowed with a fierce light, pushing the entity back. Emily felt a surge of strength and courage, her determination unyielding. With a final, powerful chant, she completed the ritual. The chamber was filled with a blinding light, and the demonic presence let out a blood-curdling scream before vanishing into thin air. Exhausted but relieved, Emily collapsed to the floor. The children ran to her, wrapping their small arms around her. "You did it, Emily!" Michael cried, his voice filled with awe. Lily nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You saved us." Emily hugged them tightly, tears streaming down her face. "We're safe now," she whispered, though she couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion's dark history was far from over. The Hawthorns returned home to find Emily and the children safe but visibly shaken. She told them everything, urging them to leave the mansion and never look back. Mrs. Hawthorne listened, her face pale and drawn. "We've known about the pact for generations, but we were too afraid to do anything," she admitted. "Thank you, Emily. You've given us a chance to break free." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with determination. The mansion may be haunted by its past, but it doesn't have to define your future. Leave this place and start anew. The Hawthorns took her advice, selling the mansion and moving far away. Emily returned to her life, forever changed by the horrors she had faced. She knew that evil lurked in the shadows, but she also knew that courage and love could overcome even the darkest of forces. And as the grand, secluded mansion stood empty and silent, it seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, its malevolent spirits finally at rest. Yet somewhere deep within its ancient walls, a faint whisper echoed, a reminder that the darkness was never truly gone, only waiting for another opportunity to rise. Amanda Clark had always been good with kids. At 21, balancing college classes with part-time babysitting was a challenge, but she found it rewarding. The assignment that night seemed straightforward enough, looking after two siblings, Lily and Ben, while their parents attended a charity gala. The quiet suburban neighborhood exuded a sense of safety and calm. Yet, as Amanda stepped into the house, a subtle unease prickled her skin. Lily and Ben were polite, but unusually reserved for their age. 8-year-old Lily had a habit of staring blankly into space, while 6-year-old Ben clutched his stuffed bear with an iron grip, his wide eyes darting nervously around the room. Amanda tried to engage them in games and stories, but their responses were distant, almost mechanical. As evening fell, Amanda put the children to bed and settled into the living room with a book. The house was eerily silent, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Around midnight, she heard soft footsteps and giggles. She climbed the stairs and found the children's beds empty, the sheets rumpled and cold. Her heart pounding, Amanda followed the sound of laughter outside. The moon cast a pale light over the neighborhood, and she saw the children walking hand in hand towards an abandoned playground on the edge of town. The sight was unsettling. The once lively playground now stood in disrepair, rusted swings creaking in the wind, and overgrown weeds reclaiming the sandbox. Amanda hurried after them, calling their names. The children didn't turn around, but continued their steady march towards the playground. She reached the gate just as they slipped through, disappearing into the shadows. Pushing the gate open, Amanda stepped inside and felt a chill wash over her. The air was heavy with an unnatural cold, and she could hear faint whispers carried on the wind. She found Lily and Ben standing in the center of the playground, their faces blank and eyes glassy. They moved in eerie synchronization, tracing strange symbols in the dirt and chanting in a language Amanda didn't recognize. Panic surged through her. This wasn't a game, and the children were in danger. "Lily! Ben!" she shouted, but they didn't react. Desperation drove her forward, and she grabbed their arms, shaking them. "We need to go home now!" For a moment, their eyes flickered with recognition, but then a shadow passed over them, and they resumed their ritual. Amanda's mind raced. She had to break whatever spell had them in its grip. Her gaze landed on an old swing set, its chains rusted and tangled. An idea sparked, and she began to push the swings, creating a cacophony of screeching metal. The children's chanting faltered, and Amanda took advantage of the momentary distraction. She scooped Ben into her arms and grabbed Lily's hand, pulling them towards the gate. The whispers grew louder, angry now, but she didn't stop until they were back inside the house. The door slammed shut behind them. Breathless and trembling, Amanda checked the children for injuries. They seemed dazed, but unharmed. She put them to bed again, this time staying by their side until she was sure they were asleep. Exhausted, she collapsed on the couch, her mind whirling with questions. The next morning, Amanda was determined to uncover the truth. She visited the local library, digging through old newspapers and town records. Her search led her to a forgotten tragedy. Decades ago, the playground had been built over an old cemetery. A terrible accident had claimed the lives of several children, and their restless spirits were said to haunt the area, seeking new playmates. Amanda returned to the house, her resolve steeled. She had to protect Lily and Ben from the malevolent entities. That evening, she spoke to the children, hoping to understand their connection to the spirits. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she described the voices that called to them, promising games and friendship. Ben clung to his bear, whispering about the cold hands that sometimes touched him in his sleep. As night fell, Amanda prepared for a confrontation. She gathered salt and holy water, remembering her grandmother's tales of warding off evil spirits. She drew protective circles around the house and kept the children close. The whispers returned, growing louder and more insistent, but Amanda stood her ground. At midnight, the spirits attacked. Shadows twisted and writhed, reaching out with ghostly fingers. The air grew frigid, and the lights flickered ominously. Amanda held the children tight, chanting prayers she barely remembered. The spirits howled in rage, but the protective circles held. Hours passed in a tense standoff, but as dawn approached, the spirits' power waned. With the first light of day, the shadows retreated, and the whispers faded to silence. Amanda collapsed, exhausted but victorious. The ordeal had left its mark on the children, but they slowly began to recover. The family moved away from the neighborhood, seeking a fresh start. Amanda returned to her studies, forever changed by the experience. She knew that evil lurked in the most unexpected places, but she also knew the strength of a determined heart. The abandoned playground remained, a silent testament to the past. And though the spirits had been driven back, they were never truly gone, waiting for the day when someone else might wander into their domain. But for now, the children were safe, and Amanda's bravery had brought a semblance of peace to their haunted lives.
As we conclude our journey through these chilling tales, remember that darkness lurks where we least expect it. Whether it's the haunting secrets of a mirror, the malevolent spirits of a playground, or the sinister rituals that bind us, these stories remind us of the fragile line between the ordinary and the supernatural. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay tuned for more spine-tingling stories. Until next time, stay safe and may your dreams be free of shadows.